Think for a moment about the battles we don't see. No explosions, no troops moving, just lines of code slipping silently into the digital world. Today we're diving deep into Stuxnet. It's a true story of digital warfare. And it's dark, it's immersive, and everything you're about to hear, it's fact.
Yeah, this isn't just another computer virus story. I mean, this is really the moment the game changed forever. The digital world and the physical world, they collided with, well, unprecedented force. We'll get into how Stuxnet actually worked, who was likely behind this, digital weapon, who the target was, and crucially, why even years later, its impact on cybersecurity, on global politics, is still massive.
And we're going beyond just the headlines here. We're looking into the shadows. There's the unexplained death of a Dutch engineer, the really high-stakes geopolitical game being played out behind the scenes, and the very real human cost of this digital conflict. So forget what you think you know about cyber attacks. This is different. This is digital warfare, raw and real. Okay. Let's start at the beginning then. Where did this whole story first surface?
Well, the first real hint that something extraordinary was happening came back in 2010. And it's actually quite significant that it wasn't one of the huge international security firms that spotted it first. It was, believe it or not, a smaller company over in Belarus, Virusblata.
Virusblata. So a smaller player caught something the giants missed.
Exactly. One of their clients reported this really persistent issue. Their computer just kept crashing randomly. Now, on the surface, maybe a minor problem, right? But their software,
Yeah.
it flags something deep, something very unusual right within the core of Windows.
So more than just your average bit of malware, though.
Oh, significantly more. What Virusblata had actually stumbled upon was something called a zero-day exploit. Think of it like a fortress. It's got walls, guards. Those are your usual security systems, right? Known weaknesses get patched. A 0-day. That's like a secret passage, one the builders themselves didn't even know was there. And the exploit part, that's the key, specially crafted, to open that hidden door.
Right. And those are incredibly rare, aren't they? Like finding a needle in a massive digital haystack.
Even rarer than that, really. I mean, we see millions of new malware samples every year. But most are just variations on known themes, known threats. But a completely new, unknown vulnerability. Combined with the sophisticated code needed to actually use it, that's exceptionally unusual. Maybe only a handful are discovered each year. They're the ultimate prize for cybercriminals, and especially for state-backed actors.
And Stuxnet, it didn't just use one of these digital skeleton keys.
Well, the initial discovery revealed one, but the deeper the analysis went, the more layers they peeled back, the more sophisticated Stuxnet appeared. It actually turned out to be leveraging an unprecedented 4 distinct 0-day exploits. 4.
4?
Yeah.
Okay. And the first one they found, how did that work? How did it spread?
The first one identified was its method of propagation, how it actually jumped from machine to machine, and it was infected USB drives. It exploited a flaw in how Windows handled LNK files, those seemingly harmless shortcut files you see everywhere. You plug in an infected USB stick.
Yeah, and the invisible enemy just slips right inside. No clicking required. Okay, so once this very unusual code was out there, who started putting the pieces together? Who saw the bigger picture?
Right. That's when the larger security firms really got involved. People like Liamo Murchu at Symantec. His job involved sorting through this just massive daily volume of malware discoveries. They get like over 1 million new malicious files every single month. And the vast majority, it's automated, known threats dealt with quickly. But Stuxnet, it stood out. It was different.
Different how? What made it jump out from all that, digital noise?
Well, its code structure was just unlike anything they'd really seen before. It contained these really specific, kind of peculiar strings of data. Imagine finding, I don't know, a sentence fragment written in a completely unknown language embedded inside a normal computer program. That's how unusual and specifically crafted it looked. It immediately suggested a highly specialized purpose, not just, stealing credit card numbers or something.
And where was this strange, unprecedented code actually popping up geographically?
The initial analysis of where infections were happening showed a real concentration in Iran, Indonesia, and India. But Iran had the overwhelming majority. Something like 59% of all infected systems were located there.
Almost 60% in just one country. That really doesn't feel like a random distribution.
Not at all. And what was particularly alarming, really worrying, was Stuxnet's ability to spread even on networks that were completely cut off from the internet. It could jump laterally from one computer to another using those infected USB drives, even within what we call air-gapped networks.
Air-gapped. right? The ones that are physically disconnected from the outside world, supposedly the ultimate in digital isolation.
Exactly. These were the systems everyone thought were pretty much untouchable by external cyber threats. Stuxnet basically proved that assumption was dangerously wrong. And then came the really crucial realization about what this malware was actually designed to do.
Something much more damaging than just crashing a few computers, I take it?
Precisely. It was Nicholas Falliere, also at Symantec, who made the critical discovery. The payload, the active part of the malware, the bit designed to actually inflict harm, it was specifically targeting industrial control systems.
Industrial control systems,
Yeah.
you mean stuff that runs like critical infrastructure,
Yeah.
power grids, factories, that kind of thing.
Exactly that. And what's fascinating and frankly quite concerning is that for years, experts have been warning about vulnerabilities in these systems. But the prevailing belief was, well, they were too obscure, too isolated to be a major target. But over time,
Those digital walls started crumbling. They got connected.
gradually, yes. These industrial controllers were increasingly being connected, maybe not directly to the internet always, but to other networks that did have online access. It created pathways, potential intrusion routes. And Stuxnet wasn't just some generic attack against any industrial system. No, it specifically targeted Siemens Step 7 software.
Siemens Step 7. Okay, what exactly is that?
It's a really crucial piece of software. It's used to program PLCs, programmable logic controllers. Think of PLCs as the sort of digital brains that control complex electromechanical processes in industrial settings, including, significantly, the gas centrifuges used for enriching uranium.
Uranium enrichment. Okay, now we're definitely talking about highly sensitive geopolitical territory. So the malware wasn't just looking for any old Siemens system. It was more specific.
No, not at all. It's incredibly specific nature, the systems it looked for, the software it targeted. It pointed directly towards a very, very particular target. Suspicion quickly and understandably focused on Iran's uranium enrichment program, specifically the huge facility at Natanz. Suddenly, that 60% infection rate concentrated in Iran. It made terrifying sense.
And it wasn't just about widespread infection, was it? There was an even finer level of targeting going on.
Absolutely. This is key. Out of the, over 200,000 infected computers they found worldwide, researchers eventually identified only about 217. Just 217 machines that seemed to be the actual intended targets of the destructive payload. This incredibly small number within that much larger infection footprint strongly suggested a deliberate act of sabotage, aimed at very specific industrial equipment, not just, widespread data gathering.
Okay, so Stuxnet gets in, it finds these specific systems running the Siemens software.
And what?
How did it actually manage to cause physical damage from inside the digital realm?
Right. This is where the sophistication, the sheer ingenuity of Stuxnet becomes truly chilling. It was engineered to identify very specific hardware components, frequency converters to be precise. And these were critical parts made by only two companies in the world. One was Vacon in Finland, the other was Faropaya, based in Iran. These devices essentially control how fast the centrifuges spin. Think of it like a very precise speed dial for a very delicate machine.
It could actually identify the manufacturer of specific hardware components. That's an incredible level of detail for malware.
Precisely. And once it confirmed it was on a system controlling one of these specific converters, it started monitoring the operating frequency of the connected centrifuges. Now, for uranium enrichment, these things need to spin at a very precise, very consistent speed, around 1064 hertz. Stable is key. Stuxnet would wait for the right conditions, and then, like a saboteur subtly adjusting a machine's controls to make it fail, it began to manipulate that frequency.
Manipulated how? Just like a tiny adjustment to throw things off.
Oh no, nothing subtle about the manipulation itself. It would dramatically increase the frequency, push it way up to 4,410 hertz, and hold it there for a full 15 minutes. This puts immense, unseen physical strain on these very delicate, high-speed mechanical components. Then, just as suddenly, it would slam the metaphorical brakes, dropping the frequency way down to just 2 hertz for another 15 minutes, causing huge stress in the opposite direction. These extreme swings up and down repeated over time, they caused the high-speed centrifuges to literally tear themselves apart prematurely.
Wow. That's brutal. But surely the operators, the engineers watching the controls, wouldn't they see these wild frequency changes on their monitors? Wouldn't alarms go off?
Well, here's where the true genius and the really deceptive nature of the attack comes into play. While all this destructive manipulation was actually happening in the physical world, Stuxnet was simultaneously recording the normal sensor readings, the frequencies, as they should have been. And it played that recorded data back to the operator's control consoles. It was like a thief replacing the live feed from a security camera with a repeating loop showing an empty room. So the operators, they saw everything looking perfectly normal on their screens. They were completely oblivious to the fact that their multi-million-dollar equipment was being systematically destroyed.
Complete deception. Okay, so what was the actual real-world result of this invisible sabotage? What did Iran actually start to see happening?
Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, they started noticing something highly unusual. See, typically, Iran would have placed maybe 10% of its centrifuges each year, just due to normal wear and tear, material fatigue. So out of the roughly 8,700 they had installed at the Natanz facility, that meant replacing around 800 per year. That was the baseline. But after Stuxnet started doing its work, the IAEA's surveillance cameras inside Natanz revealed this astonishing surge in replacements. Suddenly, workers were swapping out somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 centrifuges in just a few short months.
That's a massive, undeniable spike. I mean, that's way beyond normal failure rates. Something was clearly seriously wrong.
Exactly. Now, initially, Iran was, perhaps understandably, reluctant to admit anything was amiss, but eventually President Ahmadinejad did acknowledge publicly that, quote, a limited number of our centrifuges had experienced problems. He attributed it to malicious software affecting electronic components. He didn't specifically name Stuxnet or the Natanz facility, but the timing, the description, it was unmistakable.
And the estimates of the actual damage caused, they were pretty substantial, weren't they?
Yes, some credible assessments suggested that Stuxnet might have successfully destroyed close to 1/5, maybe 20%, of Iran's operational nuclear centrifuges at the time. That would have represented a significant setback to their uranium enrichment progress. And the sheer complexity, the resources needed, the 40 days, the testing involved, it led cybersecurity experts, firms like Kaspersky Lab, F-Secure, to conclude pretty quickly, this couldn't have been garden variety hackers. This almost certainly had to be the work of a nation state or maybe multiple states working together with very significant resources.
So the big question then, who? Who do most experts believe is actually behind this unprecedented digital attack?
Well, there was obviously a lot of speculation, but Richard Clarke, who was a top U.S. counterterrorism official across several administrations, he stated it quite plainly. He said he believed the U.S. government was behind Stuxnet, potentially with crucial assistance from Israel. The thinking was that Israel might have provided vital intelligence, perhaps about the specific configurations at Natanz, or even access to a physical testing environment that closely mirrored the target facility setup.
And how was this framed? I mean, was it seen as an act of war, a cyber warfare?
Clarke described it more as a covert action, something authorized at the very highest levels, designed to achieve a specific geopolitical goal, slowing Iran's nuclear program without resorting to, conventional military strikes. It's a fundamentally different kind of engagement. But the implications, they were and are incredibly far-reaching.
In what way did it really change the global landscape? What was the threshold it crossed?
It essentially legitimized, or at least demonstrated the viability of, using cyber weapons to cause actual physical destruction of infrastructure. That crossed a really significant, and many would argue dangerous, threshold. It wasn't just about stealing data or disrupting websites anymore. As Sean McGurk, a former official at Homeland Security, put it rather ominously, the box has been opened, the genie is out of the bottle. There was no going back after Stuxnet.
And there were these whispers, these reports, about a human element too.
Yeah.
Someone possibly involved in physically getting Stuxnet into that supposedly secure, air-gapped facility.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shadowy figure.
Yes, exactly. Reports started circulating, often citing intelligence sources, concerning a Dutch engineer named Eric van Sabin. The suggestion, the theory, is that he may have been recruited, perhaps even unknowingly, maybe via a compromised vendor or contractor, to physically introduce infected equipment, maybe USB drives, maybe something else, into the Natanz facility itself, effectively bypassing the whole air-gap security by walking it through the front door. A physical act enabling the digital attack.
Wow, that sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller. Was his involvement ever actually confirmed?
Well, the details surrounding his alleged role, they remain pretty murky, largely in the realm of intelligence leaks and informed speculation. Tragically, Eric van Sabin died in early 2009, shortly after leaving his job at a company linked to the Natanz supply chain. His death was initially ruled an accident, but the circumstances have always been described as, well, mysterious. It just adds another layer of darkness and intrigue to this already incredibly complex story.
It really sounds like Stuxnet was designed for stealth, for operating under the radar right from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely. It employed some really sophisticated methods to evade detection, even beyond the 0 days. For instance, key components of the malware, the drivers it needed to install deep in the system, they were digitally signed using stolen security certificates.
Stolen certificates, like a forged passport for software.
Exactly like that. These certificates belong to legitimate, well-known hardware companies Realtek and J-Micron. By using these stolen but valid certificates, the malware appeared to the operating system as legitimate, trustworthy software. This allowed it to bypass many standard security checks that would normally flag unsigned, potentially malicious code.
And even though it was targeting these isolated air-gapped systems,
Yeah.
you mentioned it could still communicate somehow. It had command and control.
Yeah, it wasn't like a constant live connection you might see with other malware, but had this surprisingly sophisticated, albeit indirect, command and control mechanism built in. The malware was designed to basically lie dormant, but then opportunistically phone home if an infected machine happened to connect to the internet, even briefly or indirectly. Maybe someone plugged in a USB that had been on an internet-connected machine, or maybe a laptop used for diagnostics was occasionally connected elsewhere. This allowed its creators the potential to update the malware with new instructions or even extract data collected from inside those isolated systems. It really challenged the fundamental security assumptions about air-gapped networks.
So Stuxnet wasn't just a one-off historical incident. It really sounds like it opened a dangerous new chapter in cyber conflict.
Yeah.
What's been the lasting impact, looking back now?
Oh, the repercussions have been profound, absolutely. And they're still unfolding, really. Firstly, it triggered this massive global reassessment of cybersecurity risks, especially concerning critical infrastructure. Governments, industries worldwide, they had a very stark awakening. The realization that cyber attacks could have devastating physical consequences wasn't theoretical anymore. It was proven fact. And secondly, as we touched on earlier, it undeniably ignited a significant global arms race in cyber capabilities.
The silent arms race happening in the digital shadows.
Precisely. Nations all across the globe dramatically accelerated their offensive, defensive cyber programs in the wake of Stuxnet. Today, it's estimated that well over 30 countries have formal military cyber units. Billions and billions are being invested annually. What was once a relatively niche area of intelligence and military operations became a top-tier strategic imperative almost overnight.
And the specific vulnerabilities it exposed in those industrial systems, are things any more secure now? Have we fixed it?
Well, Stuxnet certainly cast a very harsh light on the inherent insecurity of many of those industrial control systems, or ICS. A lot of these systems, you have to remember, were designed and deployed decades ago, back when network-based threats just weren't the primary concern. Security was often, frankly, an afterthought, bolted on later, if at all. This exposure has definitely led to the rapid growth of the industrial cybersecurity sector. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. Specialized firms are dedicated to trying to protect critical infrastructure, but it's an ongoing battle.
It also seems like it fundamentally altered strategic thinking about conflict, didn't it? The potential advantages of cyber operations must have become crystal clear.
Absolutely. Stuxnet demonstrated several key strategic advantages that cyber operations can offer. There's deniability. It's often very difficult to definitively attribute such attacks, offering plausible deniability for the attackers. There's precision targeting specific systems, specific effects, potentially minimizing widespread collateral damage compared to, say, bombing. There's the potential for it to be bloodless, at least directly, avoiding the immediate human casualties that might provoke a stronger international outcry or military response. And relatively speaking, it can be incredibly cost-effective compared to developing, deploying, and using traditional military forces and weapon systems.
And the target nation itself, Iran. How did they respond in the longer term? Did they just take the hit?
Not at all. Iran significantly bolstered its own cyber warfare capabilities in the aftermath of Stuxnet. It was a huge wake-up call for them, too. They've since been linked, quite credibly, to subsequent retaliatory cyber attacks. You might remember Operation Ababil, which targeted major U.S. financial institutions with disruptive denial of service attacks. The Stuxnet incident really served as a powerful catalyst for them. They invested heavily in both their defensive cyber posture and their offensive capabilities.
It really feels like we're now in this constant state of escalating digital conflict, doesn't it? Attack and counterattack.
Indeed. It's a concerning reality. You had former U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta warning, quite starkly, about the potential for a cyber Pearl Harbor. emphasizing just how vulnerable critical U.S. infrastructure, power grids, financial systems, transportation networks could be to sophisticated digital attacks. And it wasn't just state-sponsored targets feeling the effects indirectly. Even major corporations like the oil giant Chevron eventually confirmed that Stuxnet had, in fact, spread onto their own internal networks. It highlighted the potentially indiscriminate reach of such advanced malware, even if unintentionally.
Stuxnet. It really was a true turning point, wasn't it? It's chilling, really, to consider how lines of code, something intangible, could have such profound and, well, tangible real-world effects. Physical destruction.
It absolutely was a watershed moment, no question. It marked that definitive shift. Cyber attacks moved beyond just stealing data or causing online disruption to demonstrating the very real potential for causing physical destruction on a significant scale. It irrevocably changed our understanding of warfare, of national security, and the delicate balance of geopolitical power in this digital age.
And it really underscores the human element that's always at the heart of all this technology, doesn't it?
Mhm.
You know, the engineers designing the systems, the analysts trying to stop the attacks, the operators who were deceived, even potentially unwitting individuals like Eric Van Sabin. Real people caught in the crossfire of this new kind of conflict.
Absolutely. It serves as a really stark, quite unsettling reminder. Behind every line of code, every server, every network connection, there are real people. And these digital threats, they have tangible real-world consequences, sometimes, as we've seen, even tragic ones.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About all the critical infrastructure we rely on every single day, our power, our water, transportation systems. How truly secure are those systems now in this new reality Stuxnet ushered in?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? The one that keeps security professionals up at night. We're all grappling with it. And as Stuxnet so dramatically demonstrated, the evolution of cyber threats is just relentless. The game is constantly changing. The lessons learned from this specific attack continue to shape the cybersecurity landscape, absolutely. But the threats themselves, they're constantly evolving, becoming more sophisticated, more targeted, and potentially even more dangerous.
Definitely something to keep in mind as we go about our connected lives. Maybe next time we can dive into the equally shadowy world of pure cyber espionage, or perhaps explore some of the complex ethical dilemmas posed by these new forms of digital warfare. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. It's been illuminating and, frankly, a bit unnerving.
My pleasure. Stay aware out there. It's important.